We begin with a Fox News alert. We are awaiting remarks by President Trump on his new initiatives to improve America's infrastructure. And who doesn't like a little infrastructure?
I love infrastructure.
I do too.
It's hard to say, but I love it.
You got to have some highways and some bridges, right?
There you go.
This on the heels of a remarkable day on Capitol Hill, featuring the blockbuster testimony of his fired FBI Director James Comey. Good morning to you on this Friday. Welcome to Happening Now. I'm John Scott.
Happy Friday to you. I'm Melissa Francis. The president is set to speak shortly at a Department of Transportation roundtable. We're going to bring that to you live just as soon as it happens. That is ahead of a joint news conference with the president of Romania this afternoon. We are watching for more comments on James Comey's testimony, where he called the president a liar, among other things. Trump supporters declared victory.
I think if you're in the White House, you're very pleased knowing that Jim Comey had to testify under oath in an open setting that Donald Trump, as a candidate, as a president-elect, and now as the president, has never been under FBI investigation for anything. That is a win for the president.
President Trump himself claimed that the Comey testimony was a total and complete vindication of him, also saying Mr. Comey's testimony was full of lies and that he's a leaker for releasing unclassified notes on their conversations to the media. We've learned that the White House legal team is planning to file a complaint about just that, and we have live Fox team coverage. Catherine Herridge is following the fallout from yesterday's hearing.
But we start with Kevin Corke, who is live at the White House. Kevin.
Hey guys, good day to you. Now, given the gravity of the ongoing investigation, to say nothing of the fact that this is still very serious, they're not exactly high-fiving here at the White House, but that said, there is a consensus here at the White House that James Comey's testimony yesterday, as you just laid out right there, really girds their long-standing argument that the president is not and has not been under investigation in the Russia probe. But what's also drawing attention from yesterday's comments is his admission that he shared memos with a Columbia University professor with the express intent to have them leaked to the press in order to spur the creation of a special counsel. Now, for his part, Comey defended that decision, saying it came only after the president lied about him and the organization he represented.
The administration then chose to defame me and, more importantly, the FBI by saying that the organization was in disarray, that it was poorly led, that the workforce had lost confidence in its leader. Those were lies, plain and simple.
Throwing shade over on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, the president's private attorney, Mark Kasowitz, laid out a forceful and some would argue a very compelling case yesterday, saying that if anything, the Comey hearing proved what they've been saying all along. Quote, the president is not the subject of the Russia investigation. He never asked Comey to stop the investigation, and more importantly, he never demanded Comey's loyalty to him. Now, we've also learned here at Fox News that Kasowitz's team is expected to file a formal complaint for Comey's discovery and his leaking of his memos with the Department of Justice Inspector General. That filing, I should say, of that complaint could come as early as the beginning of next week. And as you pointed out, the president, of course, will be speaking here at 2:45 in that joint news conference with the leader of Romania. Good bet, my friend, that he'll be asked about the hearing yesterday. And, of course, we'll bring it to you in live coverage right here on Fox News Channel. Back to you.
That is a good bet.
We predict that will be question number one right out of the box. Kevin Corke at the White House. Kevin, thank you. Melissa.
All right, we also learning more about James Comey's release of his notes from his conversations with the president and FBI policy on such action. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is all over it from D.C. as usual. Catherine, tell us.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and good morning. Former FBI agents are drawing our attention to this document. It's called an FBI Employee Agreement, and it bars the disclosure of records and raw information regardless of classification that are acquired during the course of an agent's everyday activities. And it reads in part, violations of this employment agreement may constitute cause for revocation of my security clearance, subject me to criminal sanction, disciplinary action by the FBI, including dismissal, and subject me to personal liability in a civil action. In this exchange at Thursday's hearing, former Director Comey confirmed that he deliberately drafted the memos as unclassified, in effect laying the groundwork to share them and make them public.
And I found it very interesting that in the memo that you wrote after this February 14th pull aside. You made clear that you wrote that memo in a way that was unclassified.
So my thinking was, if I write it in such a way that I don't include anything that would trigger a classification, that'll make it easier for us to discuss within the FBI and the government, and to hold on to it in a way that makes it accessible to us.
Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who asked the question, revealing that the FBI director had passed documents to a reporter, this morning on Fox disputed Comey's assertion that the memos are not the government's.
Mr. Comey was writing in his private journal at home at night. He produced the memos on FBI computers, in an FBI car. He started writing one, and they are FBI documents and thus government work product. They are not his private papers.
Senator Collins also emphasized that congressional committees had asked the FBI to produce these memos, and that simply hasn't happened yet. Yet the former director took it upon himself to release the contents through a third party to a reporter, so that is not sitting well with the oversight committees on the Hill. Melissa.
No, absolutely. And our audience is smart, so I know they get it. But this is the response to, it's not a leak because it wasn't classified. And this is, it doesn't matter. He still wasn't supposed to do it according to this.
You know what? It's just not how it works.
Right.
That FBI employment agreement is very clear that it applies to any kind of record that you should make or obtain in the course of your everyday activities. I mean, they're so sort of, I don't want to use the word I was just thinking in my head. They're so specific about how these rules are carried out at the FBI that, if you had a Post-it note with some, notes on it from a discussion, that would be considered work product. And you can't just give that to people. The question is, did the same set of rules apply to the director? Because that employee agreement is signed on behalf of the director. So we're going to find out whether he had to sign that as well. But it's a principal thing, right?
Absolutely. Catherine Herridge, great reporting as always. Thank you. John.
You're welcome.
Well, President Trump wasting no time responding to James Comey, tweeting, despite so many false statements and lies, total and complete vindication. And wow, Comey is a leaker. That in reference to the revelation that sparked the White House complaint that Catherine Herridge just reported on. Here it is.
The President tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
Well, that friend is Columbia Law School professor Daniel Richman, with whom Mr. Comey worked briefly in 2013. Let's bring in Glenn Hall, U.S. News editor for The Wall Street Journal. So who won the day? I mean, both sides are saying, Trump supporters are saying he's been exonerated here. Trump detractors are saying, man, the FBI director really laid it to him.
Well, I heard from many people who watched the testimony that former Director Comey was playing both a little offense and a little defense. So he gave something to everybody. As you reported earlier, the Trump team saying complete vindication. The president has said all along, and he wanted the director to say all along that he was not himself being investigated. On the other hand, former Director Comey opened himself up to questions when he admitted that he had leaked those memos that you were just talking about. And did he have the right to do so? Yeah,
and it's fascinating to see, he really knows the ways of Washington by, dialing up his friend after a middle-of-the-night revelation, supposedly, and deciding to release to him these memos that he knows are going to get out to the press.
Absolutely. So there's clearly, and he timed this for this hearing, very public opportunity to put all of that out there, putting the memos out the day before his testimony, allowing himself to control a bit of the news cycle in his own defense and to make the points that he's been wanting to make. So now the president and his team have shown a certain amount of coordinated response, which we haven't seen previously, with both the private legal questions that Kasowitz is raising to the DOJ and the congressional committees, but also how he and his team have responded both on their domestic agenda and in their attacks back on Comey.
But the whole process of a former FBI director, taking on the President of the United States and this sort of back and forth, it is kind of, I mean, it makes you kind of queasy, doesn't it? It's just not very pleasant to watch.
It's a very unusual situation, and it certainly does raise very big questions about propriety of how things were handled on both sides, right? The Director Comey, former Director Comey, is trying to raise questions about the propriety of how the president interacted with him. Now the president is raising questions about the propriety of how, Comey has conducted himself. So this is a very unprecedented, unusual situation we're in modern political history.
But he did say that he did tell the president that he wasn't personally under investigation in the whole Russia thing. And that is, that's a pretty big disclosure.
That's an important fact that should not get lost in all of this. And there's no evidence at this point that the president is under any investigation. Comey was trying to be hesitant, like, I don't know now because I'm not the director. But the bottom line here is, the president feels vindicated, and now they're turning the attack on Comey after Comey was pushing, the attack on the president. This is very unusual.
Fascinating stuff. Glenn Hall, Wall Street Journal. Glenn, thank you. Melissa.
Okay, we're waiting to see the president come to the microphone. His remarks from the Department of Transportation coming up. Also ahead, Prime Minister Theresa May's election gamble backfires, throwing the British government into turmoil and complicating the Brexit negotiations. Plus, more reaction to the Comey hearing, why our next guest says yesterday's hearing was not about the president. It was about the fired FBI director saving face.
I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope they're tapes. All I can do is hope. The president surely knows whether he taped me, and if he did, my feelings aren't hurt. Release all the tapes. I'm good with it.
A Fox News alert and developments in the Massachusetts case of a young woman accused of involuntary manslaughter for encouraging her boyfriend to commit suicide. Conrad Roy was his name. You see his picture on screen there. Michelle Carter is charged with involuntary manslaughter. A judge is hearing the trial in what's called a bench trial, no jury. The prosecution presented evidence or presented some of its remarks today. The defense requested the case be thrown out, saying that the prosecution failed to meet the burden of proof. The judge deliberated for some time and then said, nope, this case can go on. Michelle Carter still charged with involuntary manslaughter over encouraging her boyfriend to commit suicide, which Conrad Roy ultimately did by pumping carbon monoxide into the cab of his truck. We'll continue to watch that case here on Happening Now.
A Fox News alert. We are awaiting President Trump's remarks in the Department of Transportation. That's going to come in about 15 minutes. He could react to James Comey's testimony yesterday on Capitol Hill. One pivotal moment in that testimony came when the former FBI director was pressed on whether President Trump ordered him to end the investigation of Michael Flynn.
There's 28 words there that are in quotes, and it says, quote, I hope, this is the president speaking, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Now, those are his exact words. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you wrote them here and you put them in quotes?
Correct.
He did not direct you to let it go.
I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, I didn't obey that, but that's the way I took it.
You may have taken it as a direction, but that's not what he said.
Correct.
He said, I hope.
Those are exact words. Okay. Correct.
You don't know of anyone that's ever been charged for hoping something. Is that a fair statement?
I don't, as I sit here.
Yeah.
Hans von Spakovsky is a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He is a former Justice Department official. Sir, thank you for joining us. Senator Feinstein came up after that exchange that you just saw, and she asked, why didn't you say that that was wrong? And Director Comey responded that he wasn't strong enough. I don't know, he's 6'8", he has the entire FBI behind him. How do you get stronger than that?
Yeah, I got to say, that was really embarrassing testimony from the head of the FBI. That is not the kind of behavior we expect in the chief director of the largest law enforcement agency in the federal government. But what I've got to say is those words used by the president, if true, they do not amount to obstruction of justice. That's the word that's been thrown around by many in Washington. And you look at the applicable federal statute, that doesn't fit the obstruction of justice charge. And we should point out, Melissa, that Comey also said there was a later phone call after he told the president, of course, that he was under investigation, where the president said, well, gosh, if any of my associates are involved, we need to find that out. That's not the sentiments of somebody who's ordering a stop to the investigation.
I mean, we also learned there was just a ton of bad behavior by everybody. I mean, legal, illegal, it was just, you know, a lot of stuff that shouldn't have been going on, whether it was Loretta Lynch ordering him to use the word, you know, to not say that it was an investigation. Another thing that he went along with, even though he said that he knew it was a lie, but he went along with it anyway. And also when he describes that he wrote the memo in a way that it wouldn't be classified with the thought that he may want access to it, he may want to share it. He talked about how he was able to not leak it, but share it surreptitiously through another channel, hiding his identity and giving it to the media. We're now learning from Catherine Herridge there are repercussions for that. What do you think about that?
Well, in fact, you know, at one point yesterday he said, well, I'm not a legal authority. Well, he certainly isn't if he thought that what he was doing was acceptable and lawful. Listen, when he was at the Justice Department during the Bush administration, if one of his lawyers had written up a memo about a conversation that lawyer had with Comey over a case and then claimed it was his personal property instead of a Justice Department, an official document, he would have disputed that and sent the IG after the guy. That claim that it's his personal property, that is just crazy and completely wrong.
Like so many people, I watch it from start to finish. It was striking how many times.
And a Fox News alert: political upheaval in Great Britain as Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative Party loses its majority in the Parliament there. It's seen as a stunning defeat for May, who called the snap election hoping to win a bigger majority to ease the Brexit talks. And while she won more seats than the Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, there are calls for her to step down. Benjamin Hall joins us live from London with more on the implications of these results. Benjamin.
Good morning, John. You're right. This was a staggering defeat in one sense for the Conservative parties. Just 3 weeks ago, they were well over 20 points clear ahead of Labour Party, and in no time at all, they have lost that lead. Now, they did win the most seats, but they didn't win a majority, which means it's called a hung parliament over here. It means that not one party managed to get over that all-important 326 seats needed for the majority. The Conservatives came in just under that at 319, while Labour picked up 261 seats, and other smaller parties made up the rest. But already today, Theresa May has gone to see the Queen to try and form a government. The Queen has given her permission to do so already, but it's going to be a minority government. Theresa May has also announced that she's going to try and join forces now with the DUP. That's a Northern Irish Unionist party who won just 10 votes, but those 10 include added to the 319 won by the Conservatives mean she will get the majority she needs.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a government that can provide certainty and lead Britain forward at this critical time for our country.
Many people are suggesting reasons for why she didn't win, but frankly, one of the main ones is that she was just uninspiring during the campaign, and she did a number of political U-turns. And already, as you said, John, there are questions about how long she can stay on as Prime Minister, though clearly, based on what she's been saying, she's going to try and hang in there for the time being. She might have won the most seats, but it was supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, the far-left leader, who was celebrating this morning. Many thought that the party could be wiped out entirely, but instead they've pulled off quite a coup. And now we have to see how this pans out. Of course, the major issue was Brexit. The negotiations started on June the 19th, that they will do. And now many people are saying, will that even go ahead, or what form will it take? But today, the Conservative Party reeling from a shock loss at the polls. John?
Fascinating, the differences in the political systems. Benjamin Hall, thank you.
A deadly crash outside Atlanta kills at least one and injures dozens of others. This after a church bus carrying high school students collides with another car, causing the bus to flip. The youth group was headed to the airport to leave for a trip to Africa.
They were all very excited, tickled to death to get to go. There's going to be some families that have some tough times ahead, and we just want them to know that our community supports them.
The group was from Mount Zion Baptist Church in Huntsville, Alabama. The cause of the crash is still under investigation.
Well, the president says he wants to get things done, wants to address infrastructure in this country, specifically how. We should hear more when he steps to the microphone there at the Department of Transportation momentarily. We'll take you there live when he begins. Also, the testimony of former FBI Director James Comey, billed as the hottest ticket in Washington. So was the press coverage fair and balanced? Our panel debates coming up. A Fox News alert. We are waiting for President Trump to make remarks at the Department of Transportation, this round table on infrastructure. Later, the president will hold a joint news conference with the Romanian president, where most likely he will get questions about James Comey's testimony from yesterday. The press isn't going to want to talk about Romania. Despite Mr. Comey accusing the president of lying and defaming the FBI, the White House is declaring victory.
Contrary to numerous false press accounts leading up to today's hearing, Mr. Comey has now finally confirmed publicly what he repeatedly told President Trump privately. That is, that the president was not under investigation as part of any probe into Russian interference. The president, Mr. Comey also admitted that there is no evidence that a single vote changed as a result of any Russian interference.
So how's the media doing covering all of this? Let's talk about it with today's media panel. Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host. Ellen Ratner is a veteran White House reporter and bureau chief of Talk Radio News Service. Both are Fox News contributors. I want to start with a quote from an Associated Press piece about James Comey's testimony. It said this: when former FBI Director James Comey revealed that he orchestrated a disclosure of damaging details about his conversations with President Donald Trump, he demonstrated his savvy use of media and his skills as a Washington operator. Ellen, what do you think?
I actually, you know, I'm a liberal, but I have to say I'm very critical of the press on this. I don't think that they have taken the full issue around here. First of all, they have not called for Comey's laptop to be examined. He leaked. Why isn't the guy he leaked to's laptop being examined? If this had been the other way around, we would have heard plenty.
And there are arguments to be made that even though they were his personal notes, they belong to the government, essentially, Tam.
Yeah, they're a work product. Clearly, right. He made them as a result of a private, privileged conversation with the President of the United States. So when you're making a note, and he said in his testimony, strangely enough, that he wrote it in a way so that he could distribute it. So here is the leaker creating a memo where he intends, when he's writing the memo, to be able to distribute it to other people, even though it's work product. And if I also could add, though, when it comes to the nature of that AP comment, I didn't hear them say that about Edward Snowden or Reality Winner. Are we now going to have leakers of either privileged information or confidential information now being lauded as savvy, smart people with the media? It's troubling because the media understands the nature of what's happened here.
I'm not sure that was a compliment, but let's get Ellen.
My other question is if he wrote these comments, first of all, why didn't he write an update or whatever on the conversation that he had with Loretta Lynch? And secondly, when he wrote this, was this a work product? Did he take it home? And if it belongs to the government, then he shouldn't have taken it home.
Yeah, because, I mean, he did talk about a disturbing conversation he had with the former Attorney General, but he didn't seem to write notes about that.
Exactly. And, you know, look, again, I'm a liberal, but I have to say what's fair is fair, and you have got to be fair to both sides.
And in the legacy media, this is the conversation that they should be having. Questioning, wondering why Susan Collins or anybody else up there, or Burr, anyone else following up, when he said also, for a variety of reasons, I didn't want to leak it myself. Well, they should have said, well, you know, that the media would have been all over him. But what were the other reasons why he didn't want to do it personally, involving a friend of his? This entire thing seems to have been orchestrated from the start. And those are quite, he wanted to have this public meeting, James Comey, and they should have, in fact, then followed up. And since the senators didn't, the media should be curious enough to ask those questions that Americans are asking right now.
Well, Congressman DeSantis was on Fox and Friends this morning and had some interesting comments about the media aspect of all of this. Listen.
I think the most important thing was that Comey told him on 3 separate occasions that the president was not under investigation. And so we've had the media, particularly the New York Times, the Washington Post, talk about this impending crisis between Trump and the Russians, and there may have been a conspiracy. And it turns out that that was not even being investigated. And so I think the president was frustrated, and rightfully so, because there's hysterical media coverage going on during this time, and yet he knew that he wasn't under investigation. And I don't think Comey handled that very well.
My mistake. That was on Special Report last night, Congressman Ron DeSantis from Florida. And the Federalist has an interesting, it gets a little inside baseball, but they have an interesting take on this James Comey incident. Given, well, here's what they say. Given Comey's history of secretly colluding with Democratic officials to craft a disputed narrative that makes everyone but himself look awful in order to oust a top Republican who didn't sufficiently kowtow to Comey, there's little reason to assume events transpired exactly the way Comey and his friends allege, especially given that both Comey and former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara have rather obvious axes to grind on the matter. After all, Trump is the reason neither of them currently has a job. And this delves into a meeting that Comey had with White House counsel, then White House counsel Alberto Gonzales, when John Ashcroft was deathly ill. I would just point you to the Federalist if you want to check that out.
Yeah, in addition to, of course, as Ellen has noted, the meeting with Loretta Lynch, the fact that he took her order and did cast the Hillary investigation, not as a criminal investigation, but as a matter, and said nothing about that. But you're also looking here at a man who overall has been dealing with being more political than anyone else, and at least the media has recognized that, but they seem to like it at this point.
And even Ellen, who comes here from the left, says that, well...
The media has not done its job, and they haven't been fair and square, and they need to be. I mean, I'm a media fair.
We'll take your point. Thank you both, Ellen and Tammy. Melissa.
All right, we are awaiting President Trump. He's going to be making remarks from the Department of Transportation, so we'll keep an eye on that. You can see that's Elaine Chao at the podium right now. She's supposed to be introducing him, so we'll bring this to you live as soon as it gets started. Also, a massive search and rescue effort now underway for a missing U.S. Navy sailor lost after going overboard off the coast of North Carolina. He's been identified as Christopher Clavin. We have details ahead.
Fox News alert, the president is going to be speaking momentarily. That's Ryan Zinke, the new Secretary of the Interior, speaking after the Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao, introduced him. Interesting, Melissa, you know, one of the things the president is going to talk about is, could we build a Golden Gate Bridge today? What would it take to get a Golden Gate Bridge or a Hoover Dam approved today? He is very fired up about the permitting process for these big projects, and he's going to talk about that in his remarks.
That is it's such an interesting idea. It's an interesting question because, of course, those were enormous projects. They took so much to get done. It is a question, what it would take, how long it would take, how far over budget they would be, how far behind schedule they would be. At the same time, obviously, a lot of people are going to be waiting to see if he makes any remarks, the president that is, about former FBI Director James Comey's testimony yesterday. He did tweet about it, saying, despite so many false statements and lies, total and complete vindication, and wow, Comey is a leaker. That was his tweet on the subject. A lot of people are going to be wondering, are there going to be further comments today? He has later in the day, he has another appearance. So that's what everybody's going to be listening for, I think, most closely. But it is supposed to be Transportation Week, Infrastructure Week, after all. We've sort of lost sight of that.
And the president has expressed his frustration with the fact that, you know, he wants to do big things regarding the nation's infrastructure and so forth, and all the press coverage is devoted to James Comey and this argument about leaks and Comey's firing and so forth. But the president did not tweet about infrastructure this morning. He tweeted about the Comey firing. So that's, you know, in some respects, he invites his own negative coverage based on what he wakes up and sends out in 140 characters or less.
There you go. There's all of that. All right. In the meantime, we have new information on an intense search underway to find a missing Navy sailor. He has been identified as Petty Officer Christopher Clavin from Rhode Island. Crew members say he went missing Tuesday afternoon after going overboard off the North Carolina coast. Officer Clavin was on a training mission on board the USS Normandy, a guided missile cruiser sailing about 80 miles offshore. The massive search has covered 2,500 square miles so far, and Navy officials say they're doing everything they can to find him. His mother says the 23-year-old joined the Navy after graduating from high school.
Well, in the latest political fallout for Qatar, 4 Arab nations adding dozens of people and groups tied to Qatar to a sanctions list today that widens the diplomatic rift between Doha and several other nations over its alleged connections to extremism. The Qatari foreign minister criticizing those actions.
No one has given them the right to blockade my country and not to allow cars or my flights to fly over their countries, or my ships to park in their ports. No one is giving them the right to separate families and displace people.
Rich Edson joins us now live from the State Department with the latest on all of that. Rich.
Well, John, as this diplomatic crisis among U.S. allies deepens in the region, the United States is offering Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to help mediate this crisis. This is Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, the United Arab.
Rich, we'll get